Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, it's a bit of a rainy day today, so I hope there's not too much noise from the rain on the polycarbonate roof here. But anyway, today I thought I'd give you a little update on the peppers and chilies. And then I need to do some pricking out of some rather young seedlings, and I've got a couple of top tips for that process. So a week ago I had to re-sow some peppers because I had 3 varieties that didn't germinate at all, and I was starting to get a little bit worried that we would be short of plants. Yeah, that's really not going to be a problem now, because not only have quite a few of those pepper seeds already germinated just 1 week later, I divided some of the other stock in the little pots. I sowed 3 seeds, so normally I would just pull out the 2 that I don't like the look of the most. Very often there's not much to choose between them, but this time I did prick out just a few of those to multiply that stock a bit in case I was still having problems. So I've now got a ton of plants, but it's only been a week, and I know when I last showed them there were just tiny true leaves starting to show up. Well, now they've got some pretty big true leaves. They're growing away really well. Let me give you a look. So these plants have really come on in the last week, and it's really remarkable just how quickly they will grow. So these true leaves here, they were only just showing up, and then there's the second pair now starting to come on most of these. I can give you a closer look on this plant. So these were hardly visible last week, and yeah, no bigger than the second pair there. So they're doing quite nicely. They are a little bit taller than I would like, of course, but that's because of the poor light levels this time of year. There's very little I can do about that. Of course, I know some gardeners have grow lights, but I don't have any, and I was thinking about it last year, but I think I will manage without. This is how I've done it for years now. The propagators, I think, are a really good investment, at least for us, because we want to produce quite a lot of plants and early in the year. When I pot these on, I will be dropping these down a little bit, maybe as deep as the first, well, the seed leaves, let's say. So that will help with that. But they're not bad little plants. They're reasonably sturdy. I would like it if they were a bit more stocky, but you just can't get that, I don't think, at this time of year with just natural light. But anyway, the plants themselves are looking pretty healthy, and I think the growth is pretty good. You can see 1 or 2 of these are smaller. Those are ones that I pricked out a little bit later, but all the others are looking great. Having multiplied that stock up a little bit, I undoubtedly have far too many of the wrong sorts of plants, but I'd rather have an excess than too few later in the year. So here's the tray that I re-sowed. I've got 4 varieties in here. I know there were only 3 that didn't germinate, but another one caught my eye. I couldn't help myself. So I dumped the entire contents of those 4 packets of seed in this tray. Fresh seed for this season. Germination, well, 1 week on, it's looking pretty good. Now, peppers and chilies, some of them can take several weeks to get going. Most of the ones I'm growing here, I think, are pretty quick to germinate. Some of the other sorts, they can be a lot slower. But it's one of those things. That old seed, it was only 1 year old, and I think that should have been perfectly fine this year, and I think it could have done something next year as well. Obviously germination will decline slowly over time, but 1 year old chili and pepper seed, I think that ought to still be germinating pretty well. The date on the packet was for the middle of next year, so that's a bit rubbish. However, this is one of those crops that's really quite important to us, and of course every gardener is different. Everybody has their own favourite crops. For us it's the chilies, the peppers and the tomatoes. They're at the top of our list. So I don't want to mess about with them again in the future. I'm not going to sow old seed. I'll buy fresh seed each year, or then save some of my own. But for that reason, I just sowed the lot, and that's left me with lots of seedlings. And I'm not going to prick out all of those, of course. I don't need that many plants, but I will prick out some of them. And I'm going to start doing that today, even though they are rather young. So I know from some of the comments that I get that lots of the viewers are very experienced gardeners, but I'm going to share a couple of tips for anybody who's not so comfortable with pricking out small seedlings. It's one of those things where you might imagine it's more tricky than it actually is, because the truth is that it will very rarely fail. If I prick out 10 of these pepper plants today, I would expect all 10 of them to be perfectly happy in a week's time, growing away, quite content. Failure of it is really quite rare. You have to be remarkably brutal with a plant to kill it off. I'm always amazed at just how resilient even tiny young seedlings are. And it's not true of everything, of course. There are some plants that really hate to be transplanted, and they're well known for dislike of any root disturbance. But chilies and peppers, they're not like that at all. They will transplant very easily. Onions, they will transplant with the greatest of ease. Leeks, of course, most people do transplant leeks. They go very nicely. So there are one or two exceptions to that rule. Some things that really hate having anything messing around with their roots, but for the most part, pricking out is not something to be concerned about. There are just two top tips that I would offer. The first one, and you'll see it in a moment, is that the first thing that little plant has done when it germinated is send straight down, more or less straight down, a very long, thin root. It is remarkably long. Very often we'll see what we've got in here. There's not a huge depth in this tray, so I don't know how long that will be, but if you've got these in a pot, they can be remarkably long roots, and they are quite delicate. So if you go tugging on that plant, that root will break and be damaged. So we want to avoid that sort of damage if we can. As the plants develop, then you get a little cluster of roots around the where the seed is, effectively, and that little cluster is a lot more robust. But that very fine root that goes down first, that one is a little bit delicate, so needs a little bit of care. The other top tip is never to handle little seedlings by the stems. So that stem is very tender when they're young like this, and there are quite important vascular tissues just beneath the surface, and it's very easy to crush those with pressure from the fingers. So they should always be handled just by one of the leaves. And very often you can leave the seedlings in the tray until the first true leaves appear, and then you can prick them out. They've got a lot more root to them, and they're slightly easier to handle. These, of course, will have very little root, but they will still transplant perfectly okay, so long as I'm a little bit careful about how I do it. So time for me to shut up and get on with some work. So my weapon of choice here, I've just got this old chopstick that's been kicking around in the greenhouse for years. I just need something to help me get down underneath the roots and ease these plants out of the soil, because I really don't want to be tugging on them to get them out. Anything you've got to hand, a little bit of split bamboo cane or anything like that, any tool you've got that's suitably fine, just to help ease them out, will do. I'm going to give these the best treatment I can. The compost in these pots is warm. I've got warm water to water them in with. This compost is already damp, but I will water those in afterwards just to make sure there's good soil contact with the roots. So these are a little bit tricky, of course, because they are very close together. So some of these I might leave till later. For example, this one is an ideal candidate. There's another one right next to it that's only just coming out. So I don't know, I might have a go at that one in a minute, but I'd like to take these out without disturbing their friends. Over here, things are looking a lot more promising. So let me make a start. This one is a little bit small, but I'll begin by making a deep hole in the middle of this pot to receive the seedling. I'll just hold it by the end of that leaf, and now I want to go down to the bottom of the pot, get under that root there and start easing up the soil, and I'll just ease that away. It's quite light compost, and there comes that great long root. So you can see that root is much deeper than the growth on the top of the plant. I don't know if this will show up, but you can start to see the fine root system developing up the top. I'll give that a closer look. The camera doesn't often focus this close. So this is quite a good little root system actually. I've pricked these out when they're so small that there's almost no fine root up this end, but here we've got that long root out without damaging it, and I'm just going to drop that down the center of the pot here in that hole. I can use the little dibber to make sure that root goes right down. And now I'm not going to press from the top, but I'm going to press from the side. I'm going to bring that soil in around that plant, making sure it's got good contact all the way down. If I need to, I can top up that pot with a little bit of the more compost, and then a drop of water. And now I can be fairly confident that there is soil surrounding that whole root system down there, and this is nicely moist. This plant is really not going to suffer from that process at all. It will hardly know it's ever left that tray, and that's all there is to it. Just needs a little bit of care, and if my chunky digits can manage it, then I'm pretty sure anybody can prick out with equal success. So let's do a few more. Nice deep hole. Just grab it by that leaf. I'm going to take both of these, so it doesn't matter if I lift this one up a little bit at the same time. I will probably take this entire cluster of plants actually. Come down the other side, just ease that out of the soil. You can put just the tiniest little bit of pressure on this seedling. I'm really not trying to tug it at all. There we go. There's the beginning of the root system there, and we've got the long root out intact, just as I want. Drop it down the hole, make sure that root is nicely arranged, and then get good contact with the soil on all sides there, and that is lovely. Drop of water to make sure that's all settled about. So I have lowered those a little bit as I potted them on, and that is fine, and pretty much at every stage these are moved on, I will drop them down. When I come to pot these on later, they'll be dropped down as deep as the start of the seed leaves. So this stem of course will elongate here over the next few weeks, and I'll be able to drop that down a couple of inches again later on. As soon as I've done a couple of these, I will move them into the propagator so that they're back in a nice warm environment that they will enjoy. It's interesting here, these two are the bull's horn peppers, and I've noticed this before, that the yellow sort is always behind the red. I've had this where the red has all been germinated and moved on, and the yellow is only just starting to come up. But the difference here, I think, because they are perfectly fresh seed, is not so marked. But even so, you can see that the yellow is definitely behind the red sort, and it's something I've noticed on quite a few occasions now, so I'm starting to think there might be something in it. But anyway, these are the ones that are really important. These are our main peppers for the bigger greenhouse. And I've got a fly there that I don't like. Go away. Looked like it might have been a fungus gnat. I hope not. They are pesky little fellas. Right, a deep hole here, as usual. And then I want to get down deep under that. I'm going to take these two as well, so I can sort of, it doesn't matter if I ease them up a little bit as well. Putting very little pressure on the seedling itself, and there it comes, all intact. Just the start of the root ball up the top. Drop that carefully down the hole. I'm not shoving that in, I'm just helping to guide that, and then pushing the soil back against that stem, just ensuring there's no sort of air gaps or big parts where that stem is in the air rather than the soil. And healthy amount of water there just to settle it in place, and that one will be absolutely fine, I'm sure. As long as you get the root out in good condition, then it's very unusual for the transplant not to take. These two are a little bit younger, but even so, they will happily transplant. Out you come. Yeah, very long root on that one. Down you go. And then push the soil in. Yeah, nice. You can see from the neck of it here, this one is only just unfolded, so this probably popped its head up yesterday, folded over as they are, and it's only just unfolded, so there's no difficulty pricking these out when they are very young. Well, I'll carry on now and prick out more of at least 3 of those. I'll probably leave the yellow variety for another day or two, because they are definitely a little bit behind. I don't know why that would be, but there must be something in its makeup, and it's something I've observed before, so I'm suspecting that is a genuine pattern, but I'm probably never going to find out what the answer to that question may be. But never mind. I've got tons of seedlings here now, and fresh seed is definitely a lesson I will be carrying forward into next season. But this is a job that actually I rather enjoy. So long as I've got the time to just take my time and be careful doing it, it's a really pleasant little task. I'm in the greenhouse, which is a lot nicer than being outdoors right now. So yeah, I quite enjoy these little jobs. And so long as you are careful and you get down under that root and you ease the plant out gently, you're not damaging the stem or the root system, then these transplants are usually very successful indeed. I honestly don't expect any of these to fail. But in case they do, of course, I will keep that seed tray there with tons of spares in for a couple of weeks. And I do like to have spares at every stage, so I will have more pots pricked out than I really need, and then when I pot them on, I will, at each stage, I will have some spares to hold back in case something happens. And that's always nice to have that comfort. Every now and then something does go wrong, though I must say, if you're at all nervous about pricking out, it doesn't usually happen at this stage, not in my experience. But anyway, that is all for this video. Hopefully there was something useful in it for you. But thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.